Most merciful, the most kind. Can I welcome all of you to this meeting, which is organized by Tehreek-e-Kashmir, UK, on the event of solidarity with Kashmir. In February, Kashmiris and their supporters all over the world hold events to support the cause of Kashmir, which is going on under the Indian occupation. So I welcome all of you. I know in the past, most of you have supported our cause. So what is the current situation? We have a Dr. Imtiaz Khan Sahab, who's a professor in America, but he's in touch with he's from Kashmir himself. So I would like to start with asking him to make a small presentation what the situation is in Kashmir at the moment, and then we'll invite other speakers to speak. Dr. Imtiaz Khan Sahab.
Just 1 minute.
You have to unmute it.
Yes.
Okay, I think, can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Everybody can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and thank you very much for the invitation. The current situation in Kashmir cannot be delinked from the history of the Kashmir. If you want to look at what is the current situation in Kashmir, you have to go back and look at what is the crux of this problem. When India and Pakistan was divided, it was formed in 1947, by the formula which was applied that the Muslim majority will be part of Pakistan and Hindu majority will be part of India. And from that standpoint, Kashmir should have been a part of Pakistan. But because the maps were changed by Lord Mountbatten's, that Radcliffe and other thing in connivance with Nehru, and Kashmir didn't become part of Pakistan, and Indian government sent the forces there and forcibly took over about 2/3 of the Kashmir, and Pakistan has still 1/3 of Kashmir. But it was promised, and Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru took it to the United Nations, and it was promised to Kashmiris that they will have a right of self-determination where they will be given a choice whether they want to become part of Pakistan, part of India, or they want to stay independent. But India basically didn't fulfill their promise. And actually from 1947 onwards, they extended Indian laws to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Like for example, Kashmir had its own airport where there were customs, and any Indian national traveling to Kashmir had to go to the customs. In Kashmir had its own law, own criminal law, like that, I don't remember it as Rumbin Singh Court. It had its own prime minister. It had its own Sadr Riyasat, which is called a president. But as I reiterated before, that instead of fulfilling the promise which India had made to international community and by United Nations, which had promised that they will send their envoy who will conduct the elections, and the envoy will report the result of this election to United Nations, and the results of that election will be enforced. None of this happened. India started to extend its laws, like Kashmir had its own high court. The jurisdiction of Supreme Court didn't extend to Jammu and Kashmir. They changed that. They changed the nomenclature of the head of states from prime minister to chief minister. And they infringed on these laws, which were unique to the state of Kashmir. And people of Kashmir are peace-loving. They demonstrated in a peaceful manner. But in 1989, or in the end of 89 and 90, the youth there became rescue, and movement for the independence of Kashmir or implementing the right of self-determination was launched by young leaders like Yasin Malik, who's right now languishing in Indian jail, by Abdullah Hamid, so on and so forth. And what India unleashed was the brutal aggression on the people of Kashmir. And till now, till 2 years ago, we don't have the recent statistics, about 130,000 people, mostly in the range of 15 to 30 years of age, have been massacred. 10,000 or more than that women have been raped. There have been massacres. There are, mass graves, which was discovered by not a Pakistani or any foreigner, but Indian origin professor in San Francisco, Dr. Angana Chatterjee, along with a local lawyer, Parvez Imroz. And when India forces got whiff of it, she was booted out of the country, and with a ban that she cannot come to again. And what Professor Chatterjee says, what she has seen is only tip of the iceberg. Because there are tens of thousands of people who are missing, and their wives are called as half widows. They don't know whether their husbands are alive or dead. There's one lady who has started a movement, and she has visited London and other places, where she is telling the world powers to besiege the Indian government, at least to let them know if their spouses are alive or dead, because that's why they are called as half widows. Now things were going on in India, the movement was continuing. At least there was 370, which prevented any Indian or non-Kashmiri to purchase a land. Though that was also diluted, but they gave some for these Indians 99 years of lease and so on and so forth. But at least in name, there was 370. There was Article 35A, which didn't allow Indian or non-Kashmiri to get a job there. But that everything was changed on August 5th, 2019. They abolished the law of the 370 and 35A. But there was some legal hitch by which 370 could be abolished only by the Constituent Assembly, because Constituent Assembly was not there. So what they did, they played their dirty tricks. They reduced the statehood, they took away the statehood of Jammu and Kashmir. They made it as a union territory. So Kashmir is being directly ruled by New Delhi. Lieutenant Governor, they are just like a head of the municipalities, just looking at the roads, so on and so forth, and implementing any laws which are being promulgated by people sitting in New Delhi. Thousands and thousands of youth were arrested. They are languishing in Indian jails. They decapitated the main leadership of Kashmir, the Hurriyat. Gilani Saab is 91 years old and he is in ill health. Yasin Malik is in New Delhi and he is implicated in false murder charges and kidnapping. Shabir Shah, Asya Andrabi, all are behind the bars. Basically, there is no leadership. And nowadays, if they get just of a whiff of there is some, a freedom fighter lodging in a house, they don't only destroy the house, basically, they just bombard the whole area. Thousands of houses have been demolished. These young men who are in jail, they are in Agra, they are in different areas, and their parents don't have even resources to visit them. And some of them don't know whether they are alive or they are dead. There's a land grab movement going on. Any area which they desire is important for the security. And under that pretext, they take away the land. Hundreds and thousands of acres of Kashmiri land are with the security forces. They have replaced all the Muslims population or the local population who were in the bureaucracy. In every district, the superintendent of police, a middle level police officer and above, are Hindus from Government of India. The plan is to change the demographic state of Jammu and Kashmir. They want to bring in Indians, the RSS Gundas, to Jammu and Kashmir so they can harass the local population and change the whole complexion of the state. So after some time, if they want to hold plebiscite, they will hold plebiscite and results are in their favor. The problem is international community is silent. United Nations is not fulfilling the promise. We have done reports and reports about human rights violations. There's a book written by exhaustive research done by one human rights activist, Khurram Parvez. We had submitted to where every murder and what he could is documented. We gave it to the United Nations. What maximum United Nations do, what they do, they said that we want to send a delegation. India says we cannot allow you, and that's where the case ends. Why India is doing it? Because India knows it is getting away with it. They don't have international pressure. They are not being asked questions about these gross human rights violations, which are crime against the humanity. We can hold these webinars and we can hold these protest days, that is fine. But we have to go beyond these token or ritual actions. We have to devise a strategy by which India will be forced to tell them, answer the world population. India has to be told that if they continue with these gross human rights violations, they will have to pay consequences. And the present government, though that earlier government was no better because hundreds of thousands of people were under their watch, but this government is totally anti-Muslim. It wants to annihilate the population of Muslims in India. And they want to change whole Kashmir. Time is of essence. We don't have the luxury to wait and to have we should have long-term strategy, but we should have short-term strategy also. We celebrate Black Day, but let me tell you, gentlemen, that every day for Kashmir is a Black Day. They are trying to grab the properties, the hotels, business establishments of local Kashmiris and give them to the capitalist sitting in India. Recently, there was that Ambani family. They went to Kashmir and the idea was to grab as many hotels he can grab so that to deprive locals of their livelihood. There is commercial terrorism going on in India. The orchards have been demolished. The hotels have been basically stopped. The banks have been told to stop loans to this, recover the loans from these hoteliers, which they cannot do.
I think, Dr. Saab, we got the picture. And
Okay, so I don't know how much time I can go on, but
no, I understand. But I'm just saying, if the participant want to ask you a specific question,
okay,
then of course they will ask you a question. But we'll make a little bit further progress. Now, can I ask John Rees? John, you're a political activist here in the United Kingdom. We've been raising this issue of Kashmir for the last 40 years with successive, British governments. And unfortunately, British have this tradition that they do create problem and then wash their hands. And this has nothing to do with us, unfortunately. And this is what happens to Kashmir, because each time we ask any Pacific government that, look, this is what's happening in Kashmir, there's always between India and Pakistan. Well, they have to, and they know very well the land is occupied. India is in position of power. So, why would India come to negotiation when it has, 900,000 army occupying land of Kashmir and there's no negotiation? There has been negotiation between Pakistan and India, but they failed because India is in position of power. So what I'm going to ask you, John, is, you being a political activist, with Stop the War, and also, you have a good historical background in British politics. Could you say what the Kashmiris and their supporters here in the United Kingdom can do to persuade, our government here, Boris Johnson's or maybe, next Labour government, to help us to resolve this issue of Kashmir, because we think Britain has historical responsibility.
Yes, and I absolutely agree with you about that. It certainly does, and I think the Kashmiri struggle for self-determination ranks as one of the great unresolved injustices in the world, as the Palestinian struggle for self-determination or the Kurdish struggle for self-determination. It is a product of the old colonial setup, which bequeathed to whole peoples a inability to achieve statehood, a determination to prevent them from achieving statehood and national liberation. And it remains one of the great unresolved injustices in the world. And I think in all those struggles, the first rule is don't give up. The determination of oppressed people to continue to fight is the center of any guarantee of success. The minute you stop struggling is the minute you're forgotten, is the minute that your oppressors have succeeded. And so the determination of the Kashmiri people and their supporters internationally to keep fighting is remarkable, is admirable, and is absolutely necessary if there is to be any political change. I think one of the great advantages in this struggle is that there is an absolutely clear, absolutely decisive, and absolutely uncontested ruling from the United Nations about what should happen here. Not everybody's that lucky with the United Nations. I mean, it doesn't enforce it, that's for sure. But the decision remains on the books. It remains a lever to be deployed against all those governments that pay lip service to the United Nations. But in this case, not the only case, but it's an important case in which they seem reluctant, if not opposed, to delivering on a United Nations promise. And I think with every politician, and every politician in the mainstream in Britain does pay lip service to the United Nations, the question should be asked, why are you being hypocritical in this case? You say that you support the United Nations. There is an absolutely clear and uncontested United Nations decision here. Why are you not seeking to enforce it? And why are you not taking effective action against those countries that are determined not to see it put into action? So I would say that's where the point of leverage and the point of pressure comes from. How to make that pressure effective? Well, it's a question of determination and a question of building the broadest possible campaign of educating, enlightening, and mobilizing the widest sections of the population. And I think in Britain today, there's now, and especially since the work that many of us all did together over the Iraq and Afghan wars, there is now a widespread understanding among ordinary people that their governments behave in ways which are destabilizing and unjust abroad, and politically indefensible at home. I think people understand that the great powers don't act in the interests of ordinary people, either in their own countries or abroad. And I think there is therefore an audience for this argument, a receptive audience that has gone through the experience of watching the great powers destroy Iraq, destroy Afghanistan, of failing to, or ignoring, or circumventing the United Nations in these cases. And I think there's therefore a level of public understanding and public sympathy for the kind of arguments which a Kashmiri solidarity campaign would make. So I think this is an important a struggle. It's a just struggle. It's a struggle against a manifest and obvious injustice. And I think that's exactly the kind of political struggle that gets resonance in this country. So I applaud the actions that you've taken, the work that you've done. But we all know there can always be more done, more publicity, more people contacted, more MPs lobbied. And I think that's the direction to go in, using the kind of arguments which you've so frequently deployed, and which, as I say, are not unfamiliar now to millions of people in this country, are widely accepted by millions of people in this country.
Thank you, John. Irony is that, our government here supports India's claim to be permanent member of Security Council. Our government has lobbies other, powers to support India to become a permanent member of Security Council. We have with us Sister Salma Yaqub. She's a political activist who, worked so hard against the war in Iraq, but also she's locally involved in politics, and she always, our link is with Kashmir, and she always supported the cause of Kashmir. So I would invite her to say whatever she wants to say.
Thank you very much, and thank you for organising this really, really important meeting. As previous speakers have pointed out, this is a long struggle, an old struggle. And of course, it's very frustrating when you've been raising these issues of injustice, not just for a few months, not just for a few years, but literally decades, and you don't see change on the ground. But it reminds me of a saying by Martin Luther King, who said, "We must accept finite disappointment in this life, but we must never lose our hope." And as John Rees mentioned, as long as the struggle is there and the people take it up, there is hope, because truth and justice is on their side, morality is on their side, and history will be on their side. And I'm here to say that people in Britain are waking up to the realities of what is going on. It's taken a while, but in this social media age when we can see hate being spread so easily, but actually information, experience sharing is also being spread. And this generation, actually one of the most active, the most aware generations ever when it comes to climate justice, when it comes to economic justice, when it comes to foreign policy. The actual demographics in the United Kingdom all point towards a progressive direction. And that's why we know that certain lobbies are working extremely hard to actually limit democracy, not just in their own areas, but right here in the UK. So whilst India likes to boast that it's the largest democracy in the world, we know that right now we have got farmers in India demonstrating about their livelihoods. And actually I was really heartened to see today British farmers standing in solidarity. There's pictures all over social media of farmers, on their land with their placards, showing solidarity with farmers in India who are demonstrating against the corporatization, the takeover of their land, and how the sustainable way of life will be impacted. So one of the ways to build movements is actually this solidarity building. And I would argue that we need to have a more robust and grassroots level solidarity movement right here in this country. I know people of my parents' generation have worked tirelessly to bring awareness, to keep that awareness alive. But now it also falls to our generation and the next generation to carry that message forward in terms of institutions that we have right here. And it saddens me, and I think it's important to talk about this, how some of the very representatives, political representatives that many Kashmiris have voted for, have supported, have been taking for granted this issue. We see right here in the UK that when it comes to election time, politicians will actually raise the issue of Kashmir. They will show empathy and concern. But when it comes to actual policy and decisions and actions, we don't see much movement. And we've reached a real crunch point, because historically the Labour Party, at least in words, said that they understood the issue of Kashmir and were championing it. And it's quite significant that the latest leader has now said that this is a bilateral issue. And that's a stance of perspective which very much favours the oppressive Indian stance. It actually goes against the United Nations' clear mandate that this is an issue of where the Kashmiri people themselves have a right to plebiscite, have a right to decide and determine their own future. That should not be up for negotiation, and definitely not by the leader of the opposition in this country. So there's work to be done to be challenging that. But I think it's almost a compliment to the fact that awareness is being raised, that people, the lobbies are having to work harder to actually now stop democratic processes in this country, to which are they see as standing in the way, because democracy is always a threat to all tyrants, to all occupiers, to all those against justice. And we, for many years, take for granted that at least we had some frameworks and institutions of democracy in the UK. I'm proud to be a British citizen. People from the world over look to the United Kingdom to uphold human rights. We know the historic legacy, but notwithstanding that, there has been an emphasis on human rights in this country, and that's why people look towards the UK to support and uphold human rights abroad as well. But what we're seeing actually is an assault on democracy right here in the European Union. We've seen how this has been exposed by the EU Disinformation Lab, which exposed literally hundreds of fake news outlets. 750 global media outlets were identified who were spreading misinformation on behalf of India. False NGOs have been set up. So there's constantly trying to make the narrative a controversial one, when actually there's no controversy. The fact is human rights are being violated day in, day out. The fact that today we have women leaders, people like Sophia Famida, Asian Rabi, Nahida Nafis, who are being held in the notorious jail where Kashmiri leaders like Maqbool Butt and Afzal Gul were hung. You know, these are very psychologically traumatizing realities, as well as the brutal physical torture that takes place. And the fact that the highlight, the scrutiny that should be there isn't there. But we have to live in hope. We have to live in hope that the majority of people, when they see the situation, are moved, because the majority of people want to see justice. And that's why the lobbies have to work so hard to subvert this reality, to spread misinformation, because they are frightened of the truth and the power that truth has. And I think our responsibility lies in this country in ensuring that all the mainstream parties take this issue up, that this issue is not taken for granted and not used just at election time to throw a few reassuring words, but actually not changing policy. And that's something that is a responsibility for the communities in the grassroots here, to ensure that that accountability and that follow-up takes place. But I'm by no means despondent about that. I remain optimistic, because as we know, and as history shows, that the march for justice, the march for equality, the march for dignity is not an easy one. It's a long one, and ultimately it's one which is on our side. Thank you.
I think Salma has made a very important point. I remember very well when Robin Cook was Foreign Secretary, he came to Birmingham and he met a lot of Kashmiris and the Pakistani, voters. And he said, Kashmir is a disputed issue and it should be resolved, and it is our historical responsibility. Then he went somewhere in London where Indian community invited him, and he said, as far as I am concerned, Kashmir is part of India. So, politicians do this during election time, but anyway, our struggle carries on. There is another struggle which is going on in the world, which is Palestine. And we are fortunate to have a Kamal here, who represents, Palestine. And, if you look at a little bit of recent history, the Israeli state and the Indian state, they have a lot of cooperation between them. Israeli intelligence agencies are, working with the Indian intelligence, how to, control population and how to train militarily using different tactics in Kashmir itself. So can I ask Kamal to say a few words?
Thank you very much indeed. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me. As I was listening, of course, there are, especially from Brother Imtiaz, I wrote down some of the words he was using, which occur in Palestine as well. First of all, the issue of right to self-determination is what we want for people to decide for themselves whether they want to be part of India, part of Pakistan, independent. The Palestinians want the right to decide whether they want to be an independent state or to somehow join into a state between the river and the sea. The issue of extending sovereignty, which is what India effectively is doing by saying that the previous laws have gone, is what Israel does, where it says we want to annex parts of Palestine, more parts of Palestine, even more of the 22% that remain. So there are similarities. Land grab you used, again, land grab is exactly what Israel does. The use of security as a pretext to take more land. So the Israeli Defense Force in the West Bank can decide to take over an area so it becomes a place where they can do their exercises. And they evict the Palestinians. And it is, as you might imagine, from the most important, most fertile land that they do that. But not only that, they can also come to a community and say, because we have military exercises, you can't be in your shacks or homes for the next week. Just go somewhere else, and then you might be able to come back. Also, the issue about population moves. That's exactly what happens in Palestine. They were pushed out, 750,000 people in 1948 to neighboring countries. And then even those Palestinians who stayed within what is now Israel, who have the keys to their homes in villages that have been destroyed, can't go back, even though they're Israeli citizens, they can't go back and live there. So quite a few similarities. The question, you use the word demography, again, that plays such a big part in terms of Israeli policies, because they want to make sure, for example, in Jerusalem, that the balance between Jew and Palestinian remains at a level that's acceptable to them. So here, what happens in both cases is might. It is about power. The more powerful can do whatever he or she likes. That's what happens in India. This is why they, again, someone used the words, they can get away with it. Yes, because they are powerful. We as people who are oppressed appeal to the world to try and help us. But unfortunately, the alliances are between the powerful who've either been settler colonialists themselves or have become settler colonialists. So they stand together. They share technology, weaponry. We know that between India and Israel, particularly under Netanyahu and Modi, there are big hugs. You know, they walked into the Mediterranean Sea together in bare feet, because, you know, so basically we have two very powerful nations. As you know, Israel is probably the fourth most powerful army in the world. India, certainly in terms of numbers, and you know, when we hear about the number of hundreds of thousands of troops that have gone into Kashmir, it shows you the power that we have, that they have. In Palestine, it's even gone further than that. So we are divided into different areas where you have Palestinians who live inside Israel, who have they have Israeli passports. In Jerusalem, they have residency. And this is something, again, it's important to understand that in Jerusalem, so I'm married to a lady who has come from Jerusalem, even though I'm Palestinian myself, but I'm from Jerusalem, I haven't lived there. But she has an ID card which allows her to reside in Jerusalem. Just think about that. Her family were there way before Israel was created, but they're only residents. Then you have people in Gaza who are under siege. And then you have Palestinians in the West Bank who are occupied. And then you have Palestinian refugee camps. So we are, as a people, it's very bad, because we're also very divided into these different groups. However, two things unite us. One, we are all Palestinians, and those who are outside want to return, and those who are inside want those outside to return. But the other thing that unites us has come out of a study that was conducted by two eminent professors from the United States, law professors, who said, these areas I described, Israel practices the apartheid against the Palestinian people wherever they live. That's quite serious. It's taking it even further than just sort of taking a bit of land here or there. The racism is naked. It is just so in your face to see. Palestinians can't return. I meet people in refugee camps who've never been able to go back, or their parents weren't able to go back. One advantage we have, and this may sound strange, funny maybe, but it's not meant to be funny, is the Palestinian cause has a lot more attention in the eyes of the world than the Kashmiri cause. That is for sure. It is in the newspaper, in the television, almost daily. We're able to speak out, and people hear us more than they do the Kashmiris. I think that's a fact, and that is something I'm not sure how the Kashmiris can address, but it's a really important thing. But even with that, and even though we are in the UK where the Balfour Declaration was formed, which started the real, if you like, taking of Palestine, we haven't been able to influence policy really in any way, being really quite open about it. By that I mean that in 2007, the government here celebrated the Balfour Declaration, even though the Palestinians still don't have any entity, they don't have freedom, they don't have equality, they don't have justice. They celebrated it. They still think that something is missing. We need some to help the Palestinians, but they look at it as sort of humanitarian. We'll donate a bit more to support the refugees. We'll try and help the Palestinians with state building. But what the Palestinians want is freedom. We want to be able to live as free people. I, 4 years ago, went with my wife and child to Palestine, and they wouldn't allow me in. I used to go in before that. They sent me back simply because I stand up and speak for the rights of my people for freedom, justice, and equality. And when I phoned the British Embassy in Tel Aviv to ask for help at the airport, they said, well, Israel is a sovereign nation. I said, are they really sovereign over East Jerusalem, over the West Bank, over Gaza? Really, are they? And he repeated that. I had a bit of help when I was out there because at the time my MP was the great Richard Burden, because I live in Northwood in Birmingham. So he phoned the embassy. I had a call from the consul, and his only question to me was, have you got enough medicine? Okay. He said, there's nothing we can do for you. So even at that level, the British government does nothing for us as Palestinians. But at a higher level, a word again that Brother Imtiaz used was security, okay? The so-called international community cares a lot more about Israel's security than the human rights of people. That's a really important thing to absorb. When Israel was killing Palestinians at the fence in Gaza, we happened to have a meeting with the then minister here in the UK, the foreign minister here in the UK. And he said Israel is entitled to secure its people, but it isn't entitled to occupy people and not to be brought to account. So it's important that like the Palestinians, the Kashmiris continue to fight. There's no doubt about that, to raise their voices, to raise them in the UK, to raise them everywhere. Because again, we have a saying in Arabic which effectively says, no cause is lost for as long as people are fighting behind it, to raise it, to tell people about it. And we are right. The colonialists will be consigned to the dustbin of history, but we must continue our fight, and I bring you solidarity from the Palestinian people. And inshallah, one day we'll be able to visit a free Kashmir, and you'll be able to visit a free Palestine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, in this country, struggle of trade union movement is widely known that trade union movement has struggled for rights of people in this country. And we are fortunate to have with us Ian Scott, President of Birmingham Trade Council, which represents all the unions around here in the Midlands. And he's always supported the cause of Kashmir, many times passed motion in the meetings, even help us, organize a coach when we have a demonstration in London. So we are extremely grateful to his leadership. So can I ask him to say a few words in support of Kashmir?
Okay. Oh, on behalf of the Birmingham Trade Union Council, I thank you for your very kind welcome tonight. Now, the Birmingham Trades Council has for many, many years stood by the Kashmiri community, supports demands that India not only ends its occupation, but does withdraw its troops from Kashmir. We support the peoples of Kashmir in their demand for the right to self-determination, a denial that goes back over 70 years. Kashmiris, like other peoples across the world, have the right to determine their own future. When Britain decided to leave the subcontinent, peoples in most parts of India were given some say in their future. People of Kashmir were denied that right. Despite the United Nations viewing the issue of Kashmir as unsettled and acknowledging the rights of Kashmiris to determine their own future. But in the meantime, it is appalling to note that the Kashmiris have endured some of the worst aspects of the occupation of their lands. Young Kashmiris have been killed, families divided by the line of control, some have not seen their relatives for many decades. At this point, we must build our demand, maximise support across all communities, that the United Nations and the international community and the trade union movement together must put pressure on India and the United Nations organisation itself and our government to make sure India complies with international law and respect the peoples of Kashmir. Over 2 years ago, and has been pointed out, August 2019, India decided to annex Kashmir and put the people of Kashmir under lockdown. Draconian measures, electronic means of communication were blocked, many Kashmiris were arrested, and people were prevented from entering Kashmir. We still do not know the full extent of the oppression the Kashmiris are suffering from today. Birmingham does host a large number of people from Kashmir in this city. They work in many of our essential services, and many of them are members of the trade unions, some of whom are affiliated to the Birmingham Trades Council that I represent. Well, in return for that unstinting support from the Kashmiri people, we support the Kashmiri Solidarity Campaign. We offer you in return our unstinting support and wish you all every success towards an independent Kashmir and likewise independence around the world, and as has been pointed out, the Palestinians too. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have join us anti-racist campaigner Alistair Wingate. He actually teaches in the evening, so he has to leave a bit early. So I would like to ask him to say a few words in support of Kashmir. Alistair. Has he gone away? So I think he might have left.
No, he's going to unmute it. Just yes.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so yes, yes, thank you. I'm not sure if I have a huge amount to add. I think I agree with everything that I've heard from the previous speakers. I think that the current situation is for anyone who's watching is absolutely horrific. What the Kashmiris have been put through, and some of the it seems that some of the military techniques, I think, says echo what was said earlier. Some of the military techniques that have been used against the Palestinians, which is the actual deliberate maiming and blinding of people and mutilating of protesters, is very much is what's been done to particularly the youth, protesting youth in Kashmir. The sort of cases of mass blinding that I saw with the use of these pellets that the Indian army are firing. It just seems to be a a long litany of atrocities and horrors, really. And of course, the sort of Modi's revocation of Article 370 in Kashmir, and also the Citizens Amendment Act, which he's trying to introduce, which we should introduce in India as well, is clearly aimed at Muslims. It's clearly a form of communalism. I suppose I'm not quite sure if you say it's racism if it's coming from Modi, but certainly it's certainly the most brutal form of communalist division that Modi has been stoking inside India. And of course, Jammu Kashmir being a Muslim majority state, it's quite clear that they want some form of, as was said earlier, some form of ethnic cleansing, I suppose, really. And of course, the role that Britain has played in this has been absolutely horrendous as well. I mean, Britain's arms sales to India is about well over £500 million worth of weaponry since 2015. So I suppose our responsibility here is you know, through our different movements, through the trade union movements and through the different solidarity movements, is to keep the pressure on our politicians and keep the pressure on our representatives here to actually stop the flow of arms to India, because that would certainly be a pretty good start, I think. Now that over the last year in Birmingham, just focusing locally on what's been happening, is there's been a whole long string of protests actually around at the Indian embassy, and then there's been coachloads, various different coachload protests going down to London, protesting at the Indian embassy there, and also outside there was you know, there's a whole load of us went down and protested outside Downing Street as well. And even delivered a letter to Boris Johnson saying, you know, you've got to stop the stop the flow of weapons. You've got to protest the others. I don't think anyone heard back from Boris, and I think they just like anything else with the Tories, they're just going to carry on ignoring us until we have a movement that can apply enough political pressure that's going to stop them. One thing we did do last year is there was a petition that was initiated. It was to say that the Commonwealth Games, which is taking place in Birmingham, well, it's quite simple. That India should be disinvited to the Commonwealth Games on the basis of massive human rights violations, and the Modi government, what's happening in Kashmir, but probably what's happening in India as well. So there's well over 1,000 people signed the paper petition to that, and it did go to Birmingham City Council. And the councillors never actually responded to that, because we went into pretty much straight after the petition went into the council chambers and it was read out, the city went into lockdown, and I think that's been very much used as a pretext for actually not responding to the petition, which is, like I say, demanding that India be disinvited to the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. That seems to be a possible organising point that we could do locally to create, because actually it could create quite a flow of pressure, I think, on India. Obviously, there's no silver bullet to what's happening. We need to keep protesting. We need to keep campaigning around Kashmir and you know, being vocal about issues like Palestine and Kashmir constantly, really. So yes, so solidarity to everyone here and solidarity to the people in Kashmir.
Thank you, Alistair. Is Claire Bidwell joining us? I don't know. Is she here?
Yes, she's here.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see you. You are from Let Kashmiri Decides.
That's right, yes.
That you have created. So could you say a few words in support of this solidarity event that we have organized today?
Yes, certainly. No, thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, and my name's Claire. I'm a school teacher and a mum, and just you know, heard about the lockdown of the Indian government in August 2019, and just, you know, on the level essence of a human being, just woke me up to the atrocities of it all, and so began that journey. So we're essentially a grassroots organisation standing in solidarity, attempting to raise awareness and support right for self-determination. Our aims are, you know, you know, one of the key aims, and that's what's so fantastic about this conference that's been organised by Tariq today, is that unity and the links and building bridges, that we're stronger together. As Kamal said, that from Palestine, you know, it's about balance sometimes of power. And if the people want to have the power, then we have to build that power between us. So this is a brilliant opportunity. And I really hope that all of us that are here tonight, you know, can share numbers, can share contacts, and keep that link there, so that any work that any of us are doing, we've got us here to support one another and do that. Now, obviously, Fahim and Tariq, thank you so much for the work that's been going on, because he's crossed all levels with this work. You know, politicians that will take it up to the diplomatic level, where lots of work needs to be done, where we can't access. So the only thing we can do is inform them at the lower level, which is being done, reaching councils, reaching trade unions, everyone that can filter out. So you know, that's fantastic. So thank you all to everybody that's been here. You know, Imtiaz, sorry, do I have to pronounce your name? The first one, you know, it was a really passionate speech. Covered everything that's going on in Indian occupied Kashmir so well. And, you know, so another of our aims that we want to do as a group is obviously to reach the media in the UK. As everybody's saying, it's so quiet. You know, India as well, you know, they've got their grip, this disinfo campaign, this power over economy is there in our media, and they're stopping these stories from getting out. So, you know, or there's just COVID, I know, is out there, but there's that misbalance. So that's something I think we can all try and work out for, how to reach the media. We saw the Sikh farmers being interviewed on TV. There was two Sikh gentlemen, in support of the farmers in a back garden in London. And that got the media interest, and they interviewed them based on that. Our media works, I think, in funny ways. It's wonderful, you know, how encouraging, as Salma says, to see farmers standing in solidarity with the Sikh farmers. So they are encouraging moments. There's hope, there's glimmers. You know, the world is silent. Everywhere is silent. We're up against economy, I think, over humanity. You know, it's a dispute that's been going on for 73 years. And, you know, my eyes were only open to it, you know, the 2 years ago. So I've lived my life thinking that Kashmir was, you know, about Kashmiri rugs and Kashmiri shawls. And I like to think I'm very well educated, but somehow this dispute also seemed to learning journey for me. It's tantamount to the work that everybody's been doing, that I've been able to learn so much because it's all there. So I'm trying to work in unity, let's say, with everybody. It's for the call for self-determination as a basic human right. Everybody should have the right to determine their own future. I work with as many people as I can, so Palestinian activists as well, we're linking through, because I think we can. We've all got, there's common causes there where we can all come together and build a movement to support one another. So, I mean, the likes of, the shocking side of it, and what happened to me last night was I saw a tweet on Twitter, and my heart went out to this lady, a white Western lady. I'm not sure if she was American or UK, but she was asking people, please pray for my daughter. She's fallen, she's hurt her head, she's got brain damage, and she's in the operating theatre. Now, that lady has had something like 55,000 or 255,000 retweets. Lots of prayers, and obviously I think I liked it and I retweeted it. But if you see a tweet about somebody in Kashmir that's been killed in a fake encounter, or please bring back my son's dead body, we're talking about 100 tweets or retweets. And I can't understand why there's something, why is that not connecting with people on another level? It's like as though the white Western, they connect with the lady and her child, but there's a disconnect somehow, somewhere, as though it's not real. And I don't know if there's become an immunity, people just, it's going on over there, or even the Kashmiris themselves, because it's traumatic. We are talking, as we say, it's crimes on huge scales that sometimes, how is this allowed to go on in our world? The traumas, the disappearing, the mass rapes, we've covered most of it tonight, I know, but even like reporters, you know, the reporters are stopped from speaking and locked up. We've got the very real threat to Yasin Malik's life. I think he's in court on the 3rd, 4th of March. They've framed the charges and it's politically motivated. And so that's quite scary, you know, as that's coming up as well, because Modi is just, he's allowed to run riot at the moment through India with the change in the demography and all these human rights abuses, completely undemocratic. No democracy at all. And at the moment, as we're saying, our UK government are doing very little to stand up. I mean, more MPs are coming to know. The UN, yes, very frustrating. They keep saying, we don't have enough evidence. We need more evidence. How much more evidence do they need? I can see it with my eyes. And so sometimes I think we, you know, there's a real frustration. And then, of course, okay, we'll get the evidence. We're not allowed in. So this is, it really is ridiculous. You know, I think sometimes we can get so ensconced in it and we're battling within this. And then, but when you stand back and look at it, what's wrong with our systems? What's wrong with, what is wrong? So, Jones, the simple elaborate Twitter. Yeah, I mean, I think the solution, as again at the beginning was said, we can all sit and we can talk. We all know the subject. We've shared it. There's umpteen Zoom conferences, so they have to be about solutions and us working together and moving on. So this is an ideal, you know, so delighted to be here tonight. There's many people I don't know and I've never met and I would like to be connected with. So if you can reach out to me or get my number off Fahim, that, you know, that would be wonderful, because I think that's a big thing to do in here. And it is, you know, it's about campaigning. For me, campaigning through the common person. We need to come out of what I call sometimes the Kashmiri echo chamber. We end up, we're preaching to the converted, we're talking to ourselves, and we need to come out. We need to find the things that are going to get us out, because this is about humanity. It's not, I know, you know, there's religion in there and the Islamophobia, but we're all humans on the same planet, and somehow we have to find the solutions to this, you know, for justice. And obviously there's lots of different keys for it, working at different levels with different people. And sometimes I wonder if the answer maybe will come from somewhere where we least expect it, which is why it's always worth, you know, it's that determination, as somebody says, to keep going. It's not gone on this long for no time, you know, but we are running out of time if things don't happen soon. Modi's moving through Kashmir so fast. But we know he's breaking international laws. We know he's breaking the Geneva Convention. There has to be somebody somewhere that will do something. So, I mean, here we can pressure our UK government. That's our job here. We can try and raise awareness amongst the UK public. This is where we can do our work and we can build. And if we can unite and share work and come together for that, then I think that will bring us power you know, in terms of, yeah, just unity, and unity is strength, and working together for that and keep looking for the solutions. Because Kashmiris they were promised their right for self-determination. They were partitioned through no, you know, fault of their own. And in some ways, the solution is actually very, very simple. You know, Scotland were allowed their right for self-determination. Why can't Kashmiris have their right for self-determination? The solution is very simple, and we would see a lot of lives saved, a lot of lives lived less, you know, more peacefully and without, you know, so much trauma and abuse to human rights. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak, and lovely to be here and meet everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. You know, over the years we've been organizing events for cause of Kashmir, and we contact BBC, and we said that, look, you know, there's a large Kashmiri community here in Birmingham, and you know, people are suffering in Kashmir, and we are raising this voice. And you know, they never you know, report anything. And it's always Bollywood. Is this happening in India? It's like, you know, we are the license payer, but you know, all the news is about, you know, India and its culture. We're not against Indian culture, but I'm just saying, you know, to be fair to the whole community, BBC has let us down very badly. Anyway, we have with us Muhammad Ali Asghar, who is from Kashmir, and you know, he was a councillor in Nottingham, Sheriff of Nottingham as well. He's a human rights lawyer, as well as he's been raising issue of Kashmir with the United Nations. He's constantly writing letters to the Secretary General and also raising issue in European Parliament. So I invite him to say a few words.
Can you unmute yourself, Ali Asghar? Can you unmute yourself, please? Can you unmute yourself? Ali Asghar, can you unmute yourself on the computer?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Thank you. We can hear you now.
Yeah, well, I was saying, thanks so much for organizing this Kashmir Solidarity Conference. I think it's very important that we often have these sort of meetings, in order to highlight the suffering of the Kashmiri people. And I also agree with all the previous speakers about this issue. And I think, we have to inform British community, British people, wider community of this country, what is going on in Kashmir. Awful things are happening in Kashmir. Kashmiri people are also like us. They want to live life with the dignity and respect. They want to go on their daily business without fear, getting killed or being arrested. So these are things, as a human rights defender, I always talk about these Kashmiri people's issues. We moved the motion in our local Labour Party ward, and which was passed. Then the Labour Party adopted that motion in their last year's their national conference. So we do all we can to raise awareness about the appalling condition of Kashmiri people. See, it's very important that we involve other people from other communities too. It's not only about Kashmiri people and Pakistani people. We should involve other communities as well, people who have especially have interest on human rights. But I'm saying to, in Britain and British government that let the Kashmiri people speak and be listened. Like Claire Bidwell said, let Kashmir decide. I'm also saying that let the Kashmiri people speak and be listened. Give them a vote like United Nations ordered 74 years ago. Let them decide their own future without interferences. Kashmiri people are the most oppressed people in the world. In their 3 centuries, well, in fact, they never ever experienced democracy in their entire history. They've been through this horrible military lockdown by the India, and the people are just stuck inside their homes. They're caged in their home. They're being muted, and it's a very sad state that people, international community are silent. They're not saying anything. But I'm saying this, that during this 1945, 88 countries got independence through this United Nations decolonization agenda. But the Kashmiri people, unfortunately, they were independent country. Through this decolonization agenda, they become an occupied country. We can't believe this injustice. The Kashmiri people, their issue is affecting, their dispute is affecting 2 billion people of South Asia. The Kashmir dispute is a root cause of all the ills in South Asia. At the moment, Southeast Asia is, rife with poverty, hunger. People are dying, without through malnutrition. Children dying. 3 million children die in India, just because of malnutrition. India has the largest stunted growth in children in the world. So if there was no Kashmir dispute, I'm sure that India would spend money on welfare of their own country. So we must create awareness amongst British people and international community that it's not only the Kashmiri people are suffering, it's whole South Asia people are suffering. Nearly 2 billion people are suffering. Similarly, in Pakistan, poverty is really bad. India's poverty is really bad. Instead of spending money on keeping illegal occupation in Kashmir, they should be fighting poverty. They should be fighting to provide the clean water to their citizens. I can give you one example. The one woman in she was a mid-60s. She wanted to visit her ancestral village, want to visit her mom. Through walking, she could go there within 40 minutes. She had to travel 300 kilometers, detour, and she went after 3 days, and her mother was late 80s. She couldn't recognize her. She waited 45 years, to visit her own home, ancestral home. She used to live in Azad, Kashmir, and she wanted to cross the border. She had to wait 45 years in order to get a visa. This is how bad is that? I blame United Nations and the international community. The community is most powerful, and also, I think Britain has a crucial role to play to bring a resolution of the Kashmir dispute. Without this proper dispute resolution in the Kashmir, there's going to be an atomic war between Pakistan and India. So that, another thing is that people think in West that the Kashmir issue is it's a land issue, territorial issue between Pakistan and India. It's not. Kashmir is a international issue, and it's not bilateral issue. Kashmiri people are the main party in this dispute, and unless if they don't take part in this future talks, there won't be any meaningful conclusion about this sorting this mess out. So, I request all the guests here, to carry on supporting the Kashmiri people who are the most oppressed people in the world. And we should carry on with our work. And again, I welcome your endeavor and your efforts to highlight the Kashmiri people's suffering. Thanks very much, and I'm with you all the time. If you need more support.
There's another program which is with the Member of Parliaments. We'll raise the issue of Kashmir there. But fortunately, we have a President of Tehreek-e-Kashmir European section where we try to raise this issue in European countries. So Mohammed Ghalib Sahab, so can I ask him to say a few words on the events which are happening on the 5th of February in Europe?
Thank you very much, Salman Saab. I'm not going to go into the whole background of Kashmir and the freedom struggle of 73 years. All I'm going to say is that we are observing this Kashmir Solidarity Day throughout the world, and we know there are people in this world who believe in democracy and in human rights and the right of self-determination. And they fully support the Kashmiri suffering people of Kashmir. But one thing that I would like to say, and that is the only one would like to say, on the international level and in the European countries and in even Britain, and I have also been to the State Department 2 years ago, the policy of the international community is only one policy. And they say that this is an issue between India and Pakistan. And India and Pakistan so far not been able to resolve this issue. So to me, it looks very dangerous. Imtiaz Khan is from Srinagar, and you spoke in the very beginning on the diplomatic front, and we have tried to raise the issue throughout the Europe in their foreign offices. The policy is the same. So our government, the British government, which is a permanent member of the Security Council, they also have the same policy. So what I'm saying at this end, that the people of Jammu and Kashmir, occupied Kashmir, they are determined to continue their struggle until they achieve their freedom. But I think the diplomatic efforts, they have been failed now. Now the two nuclear power, India and Pakistan, are actually, this is very dangerous. Now we have the leadership of the Stop the War coalition here, which has been campaigning during the Iraq war and Afghanistan war to stop the war. But I think if there is going to be a war, it will be a dangerous war in this region because of the issue of Kashmir. And if this issue is not resolved by peaceful means, then I think that the whole world, not only this region, but the whole world will suffer. So I think that we should have some sort of strategy for how we're going to get this issue resolved by peaceful means. And so far, there's no country, there's no government, and even including the United Nations, they're not trying to intervene to pressure on Indian government to come to the negotiation table, come to the peaceful means. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Galu Sahab. Can I ask all the speakers who are going to speak, be brief and show your support, because at the last, we want people to have an inter-dialogue, ask any questions that you want to ask. So can I ask next name Malik, who's always a supporter of Palestine and also supports Kashmir cause, to say a few words.
Most of the speakers have said what I was going to say, and actually I put my message on the chat line anyway. I think the similarities between what's happening in Palestine and what's happening in Kashmir is for obvious reasons very, very similar, because they both originate from the occupation of the subcontinent and the occupation of Palestine by the British, and they all have a colonial agenda. So I think in that sense that there is a commonality, and I think what we should be doing is working together, because when we organize demonstrations on Palestine, a huge amount of Kashmiri population in the city join us in that. I think the common thing that we should be demanding is that there should be no trade both with India and Israel, and particularly the arms trade, unless both these countries abide by international law and by humanitarian laws, and they both actually violate those habitually, and they have been doing it for the last 70 years. So I think I'll reiterate, we should all work together. We should show our solidarity for both the campaigns, and the enemy is common. It is racism, it is occupation, and that's what we've got to end. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Naeem. We invited a sister, Shama Nazir. She's a part of British Kashmiri Women Council. Unfortunately, she can't join us because send her apology. Can I ask another sister who's very active in Stop the War, also within the women group, Naila Iqbal? Can she say a few words in support of Kashmir?
What happens? She's been called out to deal in emergency situation at her workplace. That's why she couldn't join. She was
right.
Okay.
So can we ask Sister Naila Iqbal to say a few words in support of Kashmir?
Okay, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. It'll be very brief. I just also want to mention I'm a president of the British Pakistan Women's Society also, along with the other titles I have, and I'm a freelance reporter too. Okay, so I just want to say I've worked in the last 2 years on various campaigns and protests in solidarity for the Kashmir campaign. So I've attended protests in Indian High Commission in London, Birmingham, and also mobilised ladies as well to attend and also joined forces to raise the plight for women who've been facing abuses in Kashmir, and also echo the words that have been raised by Claire Bidwell and Salma Yaqub in terms of continuing the fight in the campaign and not giving up hope. Also want to talk on a practical level, and this has not been mentioned, about any human rights organisations such as Amnesty International giving any practical support to females, to families on a ground level support, especially with the COVID-19 situation. They have a number of barriers and challenges faced to the families who've been subjected to the human rights abuses. And also with the COVID-19, there's no mention about any vaccines given to them, any the threats that they're facing daily by the troops being there, and so forth. So this is something that needs to be discussed in terms of how the major access to, basic humanitarian needs are going to be provided, and also moving more so on the diplomatic level, international pressure. I'm also looking at the fact that Dominic Raab has mentioned today with the coup that's happening in Myanmar, that they condemn what's happened there, but why is it not condemned in terms of what's happening in Kashmir? Why is this matter not being seen as a value? I just want to mention that and be there supporting on the 5th of February for the Solidarity for Kashmir campaign. Thank you.
Welcome, Sister Naila Iqbal.
Thanks.
Can I ask Stuart Richardson, who's the Secretary of Stop the War here in Birmingham, very active person for last, 50, 60 years. Can I ask him to say a few words in support of Kashmir?
Yes, thank you, Solomon, for the invitation. As you said, Birmingham Stop the War for many years has been very active in support of the Kashmiri struggle. We've often supplied the sound equipment, and we've helped to promote it in trade union organisations, including the Birmingham TUC, in which I've arranged Solomon to speak. I think that it's beginning to enter the mainstream. One of the examples of that was I watched on Parliament the debate on the Holocaust Memorial Day, and generally these things are, although obviously important in terms of the deaths and the killing of gay people, of disabled people and millions of Jews, very important. But Kashmir is beginning to rise in terms of the subsequent killings, and this was mentioned by several MPs to my surprise. They didn't mention, of course, Yemen, where actually Britain is directly involved by supplying arms and military personnel in the mass killings. But I think some important points have been made by two speakers, which I want to amplify. That's John Rees, who's a national officer of Stop the War Coalition, when he said about people say they support the United Nations, but don't actually willing to support its resolutions. And obviously we have the example on Kashmir of the 1947 resolutions calling for the right of the Kashmiri people to have a vote. But there's also, in terms of that, and I agree with Naeem in the similarities with Palestine. In 1967, the UN voted for Israel to withdraw from the occupied territories of West Bank and Gaza Strip. And of course, that was never attempted to be implemented. Around the Iraq war, there was great agitation about, does Saddam Hussein implement the UN resolutions? We have to go to war to implement them. But resolutions passed the UN on Palestine and Kashmir are of no consequence. A couple of last points. There's been speak about the role of the press, and I think this is particularly shocking. I think I've seen on BBC television about once or twice some sort of oblique and limited mention of Kashmir, partly because the British establishment, the British ruling class, are very favourable to Modi, whereas in Hong Kong, where you have very limited killings, 2 or 3 people have been killed, a lot of repression has taken place by the Chinese authorities, You have vast coverage of it. Now, the death rate in Kashmir and the level of torture and brutalization is far greater than the repression of the Chinese authorities in Hong Kong, but it's given no publicity. And finally, I think Salma made some very important points about the Labour Party. In the Corbyn era, in the 2019 National Conference, it passed a very good resolution calling for recognizing that Kashmir is an issue of self-determination for the people there, is not a bilateral issue. Keir Starmer, not long after he came to power, said the absolute opposite, much to the embarrassment of many Asian Labour MPs. One particular one in Manchester was particularly agitated about this. And I think the Kashmir movement needs to put pressure on Labour MPs, who some of them depend on Kashmiri votes, and there are lots of active members of the Labour Party from the Kashmiri community, to say that the conference resolution of 2019 should be pursued and that we should not have this retreat. And I think this could be done locally with a number of MPs. So again, repeating my solidarity to the Kashmiri movement, one of the great injustices of modern history, in which hundreds of thousands of Indian troops are brutalizing, raping, and oppressing the people of Kashmir. And we should try to break the silence, break the sort of adoption of the establishment and Tory position by the Labour leadership, and say there should be an active campaign demanding that Britain stops its arms supplies to India and supports the right of the Kashmiri people for full self-determination. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Now, all the people that we have invited have spoken, and I want to, open this last session so that people can ask specific questions. I want to ask first question to Dr. Imtiaz Saab, though he lives in America. We know Donald Trump was very pro-Modi and never said anything about Kashmir. But this new administration, what sort of policy are they going to adopt as far as South Asia is concerned, as far as Kashmir is concerned, as far as this tension between Pakistan and India being both nuclear power, and there's a flashpoint because if you the way the army is killing Kashmiris, there's a lot of anger within Pakistan, within Pakistani military. So you never know what can happen. So I'm asking Dr. Imtiaz Saab, as this new president Joe Biden has said on South Asia.
I think so. He left the Zoom meeting because he had to join another meeting. That's why.
Oh, okay, fine. So if any one of you want to ask any question, we got a Fahim Kiani Saab, who's the president of Tehreek-e-Kashmir. And Tehreek-e-Kashmir is a national organization which works here in United Kingdom. So if you want to ask him any specific question, or if you have some suggestion that, how can we, like previous speakers said, promote Kashmir cause here in this country and, be effective. Sister Naila, I think, said very important points because, there's a large Kashmiri women population. We try to activate them to be active on this cause. So if you have any specific questions, then, please do ask.
I think so.
If you raise a hand, then I think.
Rich, Stuart.
Yeah, just put it to where it is and then just tap it on.
Yes, Stuart, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I was very interested by the speech of the Kashmiri comrade from Nottingham. And I think he said that it was a Nottingham CLP that put a resolution in 2019 that got the Labour Party official policy to be supporting Kashmiri self-determination. Can he say what has anything happened in his area, or what have they done in the local Labour Party to raise the issue, and any advice that he could give in terms of activating Labour Party members on the question from his experience?
Mohammed Ali Sahab,
Mohammed
did
Ali,
you heard the question?
Yeah.
he asked.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for this question. I really do agree with this question. But important thing is, the Labour Party, the new Labour Party leader and the establishment, they see me as a friend of Jeremy Corbyn. So, at the moment, we are really concerned that, they change this policy. And I'm going to raise this in our next local Labour Party branch, and we'll make sure that we take it to Nottingham East constituency, to fund. But at the moment, with the loss of Jeremy Corbyn, it is going to be difficult.
Right. Is there any other question that anybody wants to ask?
What he wants to ask. Yes, you can go ahead, please. Yeah. For your question. So. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You can ask question.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Well, I wanted to. I thought it was a very useful contribution, reply by the Nottingham comrade. I.e., the collapse of the Corbyn leadership has been most detrimental on the issue of Palestine and on Kashmir. But I just want to alert comrades to the fact that, the other thing that people should be taking up is the question of Yemen. I mean, the Americans and the Italians have banned arms sales to Saudi Arabia. And we still have complete silence of the Labour leadership towards that, despite, again, the Labour Party having policy to stop arms supplies to Saudi Arabia. And I think that that is a very important battle, and it's very interesting that Joe Biden has taken a much better line than Donald Trump in sort of saying that Saudi Arabia is a pariah state and it shouldn't be. And I think that if that develops in a positive way, I think there could be a situation where the American leadership could be pressurized to take a better line on Kashmir. I understand the American Yemenis with the American peace movement are very organized, and possibly the Kashmiri comrades could learn from some of their activities in pressurizing the Joe Biden administration. There is a left wing, a relatively small left wing in the American Democratic Party that it could be subject to pressure. So I think that that's one of the focuses, as well as pressure inside the Labour Party, as I said earlier, on the question of Kashmir. Thanks.
Thank you, Stuart. Is there anybody else who wants to ask any specific questions? I think, should we conclude the meeting? Fahim Saab, can you say closing remarks? And also maybe tell the participant, the program that are going to come tomorrow or day after, and, the program in Europe.
Thank you very much, Khwaja Sulaiman Saab. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for participating in this Kashmir virtual conference and raising your voice for the oppressed people of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. To show solidarity with the people of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir means that to show solidarity with humanity, to show solidarity with those people who are seeking for the basic and fundamental right to self-determination, and to stand with the justice. I hope that this conference will evolve into effective movement to bring peace and stability to those people who have been living under Indian occupation, subjugation, and oppression for the last 73 years. Tehreek-e-Kashmir UK was founded in 1985, and Khwaja Sulaiman, Muhammad Ghalib Saab, they are the founding members of this organization. They've been working in this United Kingdom for the last 35 plus years. And Tehreek-e-Kashmir UK decided to observe first week of February as a Kashmir Solidarity Week. And this is our first conference. We're going to have another conference on 2nd of February. And on 3rd of February, we're going to send letters to all newspapers, all religious leaders. We're going to have another conference with British parliamentarians on 4th of February. More than 30 British MPs are going to attend that conference. On 5th of February, we're going to have another conference with the human rights activists. This is the plan in this week. And, just I want to highlight the few points. Okay, we can understand that India is in denial mode. They're not implementing the right to self-determination and, all those resolutions of the United Nations. But at the moment, India has been badly exposed in regards of human rights violations in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir at international level. So far, 2 reports have been published by the United Nations Human Rights Commission against human rights violations in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and a few letters have been written to Indian government by United Nations rapporteurs. Unfortunately, Indian government hasn't replied to those concerns which were raised by the United Nations rapporteurs. We believe that we have to do a lot more in the United Kingdom, and earlier a few speakers said $500 million arms were sold to India by the United government. So India, at the moment, India is putting pressure on United Nations Security Council as well. Just I want to mention this point. There are the permanent 5 members at the moment in United Nations Security Councils: Britain, France, America, Russia, and China. But Japan, Brazil, Germany, and India, all 4 countries, they are putting pressure on the United Nations Security Council to reform the United Nations Security Council and increase the permanent member of the United Nations Security Council up to 8 or 9. So India is on that list as well. But at the moment, United Nations Security Council is opposing India's demand, and but the pressure is there is a mounting pressure on the United Nations Security Council at the moment. So we need to raise this point as well. India is the biggest violator of human rights, biggest violator of the United Nations Security Council resolution. How come India can become a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council? Once again, I'm very thankful to all speakers who joined us in this conference and showed their solidarity with the people of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you very much.